Hello, I wanted to do a second video. It's been a while since I did the process of a dream analysis using Robert A. Johnson's process, the 4-step, 5-step total process that he uses in his book, Inner Work, that we went through together on the channel. And it's basically a process for using the Jungian techniques for psychoanalysis on your own dreams so that you can interpret them and learn from them and then do a practice to actually integrate the message from the dreams into your waking life. And so I did that with a dream that I had a while back. And it's very important for me, this one. And I'm excited to share it because it was actually really deep. And in the beginning, I did a surface kind of interpretation of what the dream I thought meant to me. And it was completely, looking back, as Robert says in his book, you spend more time with it and it can actually tell you some really important things, what the subconscious, what the unconscious is trying to tell you. And that's what we're getting at, is the whole purpose of it. And on that note, I do have a bunch more. I had a really good bookstore haul, and then I had all of his other books, not all of them, but this one too. So we have Ecstasy, He, She. I think the only one I'm missing is We. So that's on the Divine Masculine, Divine Feminine, and then there's Ecstasy, and then the Fisher King and the Handless Maiden. So I'm excited to kind of pop through some of his other works, because Inner Work was really, really helpful for a lot of us. And if you have any experience with any of the other ones or any recommendations or for the next one, please send them my way. So what I'm going to do again in this presentation, I'm going to read through basically what the dream was really quickly, and then go through a slideshow in the same way that we did for the other interpretation. I hope you're all doing well, and it's a rainy day right now, cold, and getting ready to turn on the heater and order in some takeout. All right, I got it ready here. So let's start. So I called this dream Left for Dead. That's intense. It was Left for Dead / A Star is Born, because in the beginning I thought it was saying going one direction, and it completely changed. So just to kind of cover up, give you an idea of what the dream was, and then we'll go into the slides. So in the dream, it was myself, first person, of course. I had a disconnect with my partner. Took a specific note here that the dream partner wasn't a physical partner, it was like a symbol, which is how Robert Johnson talked about often happening in your dreams, is where the person or the people that you're interacting with are actually archetypes of individuals and not necessarily that person themselves. Or it could be the energy of that person with the physicality of someone else. The dream realm is funny that way. In the dream, I was trying to get things good again. And in that environment, as you talk about basically the overall synopsis of the dream, as well as what environment and things you really saw and recognized as pronounced, not to get caught up on the idea of if you miss bits and pieces. But what really stands out is usually what the subconscious or the unconscious is trying to tell you. And so to write that down immediately and then to work with it through your dream analysis process. And so that's what we'll do in depth together through the presentation. In the dream, I wrote that my partner was very cold and detached, no eye contact. And this was very, it caused an emotion in me. So whenever something evokes an emotion as well, it's like, maybe jot that down. It's trying to tell you something. No eye contact. We were at an event with various rooms. That memory wasn't clear. I remember going through the rooms, trying to make my way back to him, but also interacting with the guests. I ended up finally in a room where I was the only female. I was lost at this point. There was a group of men in the room, and they were like mechanics. One was helping me. I had an address of where I thought I needed to go. I gave him a copy and pasted link, and this is where it gets weird, like the dream realm. I had a phone. It says I had my own phone, but I couldn't use it myself. I copy and pasted a link of an address. He entered it, and it went to a site with a different address. He showed me this, still trying to help. I thanked him and tried to just copy the address text only and send it to him. So it was all this weirdness with the address that ended up being something that I pulled out as a dream image, because it was this issue or this exchange with an address that really stood out more than like the technology or different things. So as you do this, different things will stand out to you that you note down as your dream images and associations. While we're working on that, the scene shifted. 3 women entered and started to dance. It was like a cheer team, but they were middle-aged, like professional cheerleaders, like think of football, basketball, or professional cheerleaders. One acknowledged me being a woman in there. I then felt embarrassed about being the only woman there. I instantly heard another female voice faintly in the distance. I wrote down that she was probably being called out too. I felt better knowing she was also there, even though we weren't together and I was still lost. Suddenly, it became an airport. And it's funny how dreams will shift like this, but it's all important. We were at an airport. We were in the belly of the plane. It was a small group, maybe 10 people. My partner was there now, still standoffish, but slightly less. I was still trying to get answers from him, trying to get him to look at me. Discussion started about him changing jobs. The group worked for the post office. So the group of people that were in the belly, they worked for the post office. And all were in light blue uniform. My partner was dressed kind of Hollywood, I wrote. Black pullover sweater, kind of velvety material, black leather-like jeans, not matrix kinky, not tight, matted leather, not shiny. I described it very detailed because it was still very vivid to me. I'm like, what are you wearing? I think he was the guy from a gospel song or video I had been listening to, a music video a while back. So again, going back to how it was a symbol of a person and not an actual person that I know in real life. The other people kind of echoed him, agreeing and nodding. Oh, I'm sorry, I skipped a part. So in the dream, he was talking about deciding to leave his job. He was talking to another guy there who was trying to convince him to stay. Again, they all work for the post office. He said, I have to move on so I don't get stuck, or something like this. The other people kind of echoed him, agreeing and nodding about getting stuck at the post office. For whatever reason, I wrote that I felt that I was trying to connect with them. I said, yeah, my mom got stuck at the post office. A girl directly across from me looked at me and rolled her eyes. Immediately, I felt like I came across wrong. They were like, yeah, thanks. That kind of energy, like we're all stuck. Why would you say that? Yeah, idiot. Just kidding. When I noticed in the dream, I was having these feelings. Again, you're writing down how you're interpreting the scenario. I remember saying that when he said the same thing, they didn't react this way. And I remember wondering, is it because he's a guy? Is it because of my color? I don't know what it is. Trying to correct that. So I wanted to correct the feeling of awkwardness. I offered another statement. I said, well, I worked for UPS for 8 years, trying to relate. They all kind of reacted like, oh, you're the competitor kind of vibe. I said, yeah, I never really, and then said they never really understood working for UPS. Someone talked about the schedules. I thought about how I had weekends off, thought about how the post office didn't. Just all this little nonsense. We're almost there. I wasn't sure what they were saying. I felt like I tried to mention having weekends off. Everything I was saying was responded to worse. And I kept making it worse while trying to make it better. So these are the notes that actually came through as the purpose of what I needed to work through. Someone said something about working nights. I mentioned that I did that at UPS and loved it there. The girl rolled her eyes at me again. Big theme, eyes. I said I got to work on the airport, trying to connect again because, again, the scene was now at the airport and they were dressed as postal employees, but they were an airline crew. We were on a flight in the belly of the plane. They were seated and strapped in. My partner was like laying back, I don't know, like it was a ride, going for a ride, not dressed like them, not with them, but okay to go with them, I guess. I was standing on the ground, but in the room, in the belly, but not on the plane. This dream stuff. With the last failed attempt to connect, I realized they were taking off and leaving me standing there. The engines turned on. It was extremely loud. There was a piercing sound and my ears were splitting as I tried to plug them with my hands. No one tried to help me. No one reacted. The plane started to move over me. I was trying to stay away from the engines and away from the wheels as it turned. Scale adjusted where I was big, but not as big as the planes. And I just went through a moment of dodging other planes and tires and engines and plugging my ears from the loud noise. I saw a crew with airport vehicles. I remembered from my days at UPS airport. There was a belt loader, conveyor belt that helps the luggage packages go up. I made my way toward it, still unseen, still scared and panicked, but hopeful I got to someone who would see me. I wrote that all caps again because that's that eyes thing, wanting to be seen and understood. At this point, okay, I got to it, didn't see a driver, panicked and turned around, and there was the crew. A guy saw me distraught, covering my ears. He flagged down his boss. It was a lady from the same crew before that had just taken off. At this point, I didn't think I could hear anything. They had on headphones to block out the noise. I either heard her in my head telepathically or read her lips. She said, surprised, "Oh, wow, you lasted 20 minutes out there? Let's get you back," or something like that. I remember fainting, and my last thought was, I'm probably deaf now, but I'm going to sue her and this airline and live off this injustice for life. And then I felt bittersweet irony, and I heard a song in my head. It was me singing. It was already a produced song, a radio version, and I heard me singing and seeing the lyrics in my mind. Everything was black. I was probably still passed out. The song title was Left for Dead, and the lyrics were something like, "You'll no longer see my eyes. They no longer see our why for your lies. They no longer see our why." See our why and see our why, like a play on words. But it was like, because you left me for dead, you left me for dead, and you'll no longer see, and I'll no longer see our why, some things like that. So at the end, I was thinking that there was a lot about the eyes, the song, looking into the eyes, all of this stuff. And then I wrote down an interpretation that I had of the dream, and it was so off base from when I actually went through this process. So now I'm going to shift gears. Thanks so much for bearing with me through that. And let's see what the dream interpretation actually gives us. Well, let me go back real quick and I'll tell you some of those notes I had on what I was thinking originally. It was around the time that the Johnny Depp trial was going on with Amber Heard. I don't know if any of you followed that or knew about it. So it was about their relationship. They had a toxic relationship, and there was a point where I think they got into a fight, and he promised that she'll never see his eyes again. He won't look at her. And it came up on the trial because there was all this talk about how he didn't want to look at her. He didn't want to go around her anymore. And so he wasn't making contact, but she just kept popping up and going to places where he was at and trying to interact with him, get him to look at her. And it was just very petty kind of things. But it stood point in the trial because at first she was claiming domestic violence. And so the defense was saying, how is it that he was staying away from you and you kept on finding yourself in contact with him? And this continued idea of trying to get him to look you in the eyes and things like that. And so he had said, again, it was a very interesting case because, again, he, as the male, was the victim of the abuse, and she was the perpetrator. And he, as a victim, was saying to her, again, that she'll never see his eyes again. He won't look at her. They asked him about this on the stand, asked her about this, and she said he can't look at her, implying that he did things to her. Gaslighting, narcissism, this is all the stuff I was kind of trying to work with. She says he can't look at her, and he says he won't, and he won the case. He suffered, but he won. He suffered so much because of her, but also because he didn't love himself enough to know when enough was enough, to see her tactics, to walk away. So he had to endure the lessons and the shame and the pain, but then he won. He won publicly, and he won big. I'm not tracking the story, but she seemed to still be delusional, trying to hold to her version of events. It doesn't matter. People have witnessed the truth about her through the evidence. She won't admit any error or fault whatsoever, psychological condition. If he stayed in rooms where people were fed her lies, he'd continue to be victimized, torture of the soul. When you leave people in situations where you are not seen as you truly are, as a divine, they will break your spirit. They will slowly dim your light. They will turn you into someone you're not. And it's your job and your spiritual lesson to remove yourself as quickly as possible from any and all situations and people that don't serve your work, that don't see your worth or see your divine light. They will compromise and sacrifice your soul. This is And then the last thing was about the idea of making it in the industry as a hearing impaired artist, where I can't hear myself as a singer, so I can't judge myself. I just sing, hearing the lyrics intuitively and writing the music. I wrote about the idea of artists needing a gimmick or a story. There was a freestyle rapper that Brian had told me about. As a blind rapper, and he went in a verses against another rapper, a freestyle rapper, who had just been practicing and doing it longer. And the idea was there was a lot of gimmick and hype around the blind rapper. When he was going against the other guy, he was actually not as good. So it was just the idea of I don't know, I was on a totally different tangent. The guy who wasn't blind was actually a lot more skilled because he had practiced and practiced and practiced and was really, trying. And the other guy was kind of living off of a gimmick, and people were still following him because it was like, oh, he's a blind rapper, but at the same time it's all about your skill and your quality. But then it turns out none of that was, throw out all that. Now let's get to the presentation. I'm going to do some screen sharing really quickly. Okay, so just like in the other one, I did put together this in PowerPoint. It's really helpful to work through this process for me. There's a pre-made template like this where you can just plug in the dream images. And these are the steps that you'll see on the bottom corner here, the steps that are in the inner work dream interpretation process. So first you collect the primary dream images for you from the dream. And in mine, I had the idea of being lost. It could be an idea, an image, a picture, the feelings, something that you're going to later go through the steps of associating, as you'll see through here. So it's kind of a loose process. You shouldn't get too hung up on what it is. But I remember I went through, as I was reading it, things that were repeated, like eyes, the fact that I lost my hearing, and some of the other things you'll see here that ended up being the prominent dream images for me that I worked through as I did the psychoanalysis. So the concept of being lost was the whole initial idea in the dream. The mechanics that I found in the rooms that I worked with on locating an address. Then there was the interruption through the dancers. And this, I'll show you, kind of connected to a previous dream interpretation that I did on here, the first one. And so Robert A. Johnson does talk about how you might have repetitive themes or concepts in dreams, especially if you're not working through the stuff that's unconscious for you. And so there's some kind of repetition that you might want to take note of and connect it. So I did look back at that presentation. It was helpful in putting this PowerPoint directly over that one and seeing some of the words, and you'll see kind of how that comes into play with this one. The airport, the belly, uniforms. So this is like the post office uniforms that everyone was wearing, that group was wearing when we were in the belly of the airplane, and we were having that disconnect where I was trying to connect with them. They were all together and I didn't feel included. And then I was left, and then I had the eyes and ears. All right. On the side corner over here, you're going to see some notes that I put together to kind of explain some of the things that might not be on the slide. And then I'll pull up some websites as well as sources and resources. There's also a really good video on YouTube of a gentleman going in depth over Robert A. Johnson's dreamwork process. I did, again, also read the book on this channel, but his gives a really good synopsis of those steps if you wanted to look at that. I'll always leave all the links and sources and things in the description. And then this one here, this video hopefully will illustrate the process as well. So this was the dream images. Then we go one by one through each of these dream images. There's 8 here. And just kind of come up with the words associations. And I put down here a description of what words or ideas come to mind when looking at that dream image, just to kind of give a visual example of what the process of the psychoanalysis of the dream through the Jungian process looks like and what we're doing here at each of those steps. So again, on this previous screen, we have all of our listed dream images. And then again, this template in PowerPoint is helpful because I can then just break it down like that, that word lost, and then just jot down the words Just keep it moving. I love this. Okay, so what words or ideas came to mind when I was thinking about the word lost or the feeling of being lost that I felt in the dream? Fear, uncertainty, confusion, discomfort, unsafe. When I'm lost, I think of a maze. I think of being vulnerable, paranoid, taking a wrong turn, anxiety, powerlessness, aimlessness, making a mistake, panicking, needing to get direction. And then the last thing was the TV show Lost. I put certain things in yellow here as like the key that I found after I worked on this. I would revisit it, work on it again, do the next step, work on that in depth. And then as you're really digging into a dream, like he says, like sometimes there were dreams that he would analyze and it would take months to get to what the core of it was. I highlighted in yellow what actually picked up as one of the most prominent themes or something that I really wanted to work with, or where I had like a breakthrough moment, as he would say, in the process. So for me, that was the TV show Lost, interestingly. Really quick, I just never watched it. I was never interested in it. I don't know why I had an actual aversion to it. People would talk about the show Lost, and I would just be like, no, I'm not interested at all whatsoever. Brian is actually also a big fan, watched the whole thing, and we joke all the time. We're like, he's like, I would watch it again. Let's watch Lost. And I was just like, no, I don't want to watch it. I have no idea why. I just never wanted to watch it. And then it comes up here in a really interesting way. So I put a little asterisk. So I remember to return to it later because it came up as I was doing this. So again, here's first step. I'm just looking at the word lost. I have these words here. Not much is coming to me, but I'm just going through the process. Next, we look at the mechanics. Mechanics. What are mechanics? What words or ideas come to mind when I think of a mechanic? And another thing that was important in the book was that he talks about being careful not to go down a train of thought with the association. So it's not me thinking about a word and then thinking about whatever that is and then going down a train of thought. I mentioned this in the last video. It's about finding those specific words and ideas and emotions and feelings that come to mind about this specific word or dream image. And then if you find yourself going down a train of thought, just shift back to thinking about looking at the word and continuing to go directly in that line of thought. Okay, so for mechanics, I thought of fixers, specialist, male, predominantly, tools, masculine energy. They're calm, they help, support, problem solvers, they have skills. And then it took a turn. I started thinking about, real life. Sometimes I go to a mechanic and I feel like, oh, what if they take advantage of me because they are, again, the specialist and I don't know what, they're talking about. So I'm like, I'll just go with what they're saying. They have the potential to trick me or to con me. They can be opportunists. Sometimes I avoid them because of that process. I avoid going to the mechanics. You want a second opinion, and it triggers the idea of needing to protect myself. So you just put it all down there. And I highlighted those here. Interestingly, on this slide, it doesn't follow the kind of thought process of the other ones where I'm saying these are the words that I took as the main idea. It's more so that I wanted to highlight here how the train of thought or the associations took a turn from positive to negative, which was interesting for me mostly as I was doing this process. Again, it's kind of loose. There's no rules. You can color it and do whatever you want or not color it. For me, I work well with colors and thinking like that. That's how my brain works. So this helps me organize it, especially when reviewing it. But in this case, the words up here are actually more so the prominent associations that I found from the word mechanics, is this idea of the masculine energy that can help fix things and solve problems, and does so in a calm and supportive, helpful way. And because in truth, that's what he was doing in the dream. The dream image of the mechanic for me did not do any of these yellow words. It was all of these white words. So it was more relevant. Moving on to the address. I associate this with a place, map, Google, guidance, direction, certainty, home, destination, comfort, solution, protection. safe house, place to hide, security. And then when I got to these words, it was a little bit more of the psychoanalysis. So this is more in line with what the yellow will be moving forward, is like, this was something that I held on to when I went back to the dream again and again. The address for me became a symbol of security. In the dream, I was lost and I wanted to get to this address so that I could find safety and security. And it was going to be a place where I could go away from everybody else at the event. The dancers that interrupted when I was getting the address fixed. Here you see some red because there was, in my last dream, there was similarly a group of dancers, a woman, I called them the divas in the last dream analysis. And in that dream, they had kind of a different feel. And that was the words that I had already on the PowerPoint. And I put them in red here because in this case, in this dream, they were no longer happy and exciting, bold, unforgettable, interesting people that were offering me the way out from the circumstance as in my last dream. In this case, they were a little different. So they're the yellow words and the white ones. So they were entertainers still. They had this energy of being free and wild, moving, alive, and seen. But the energy and how I felt from them coming in, again, I was lost and trying to get to a certain address. It felt intrusive when they came in. They were there to serve those men. They were ordered by the men. They were judgmental of me for being, a woman in there, and it was kind of rude as well because the mechanic was helping me. So those ended up being the key energies that I had of the symbol of the dancers in this dream, and how I had to work with this dream image was based on the newfound feelings and emotions from this specific dream. Because again, this is what my unconscious is trying to tell me in this dream. So though a symbol might be the same, recurring in different dreams, it's helpful to do this process so that I don't interpret dancers for me as the exact same thing they were in the last dream. But it is important to see that my subconscious serves up this example or this symbol to me in a kind of a pattern, which fits with Jung's work of archetypes and things like that, and how you'll see that repetition in that interesting way that the mind works and the subconscious works. Continuing on, here's our first slide with notes. Okay. I don't know if this is blocked, some of it on the side panel here. Hopefully it's showing. So now we're at the airport. The airport is where the scene shifted to. Again, then I associate the word airport with travel, destinations, exciting, freedom, escape, adventure. My old job, and then also delays, long lines, fear-mongering. And then it also went into this kind of negative associations, because I'm thinking about delays and long lines. Fear-mongering was like kind of post the terrorist attacks. We got all these restrictions in place, right? That's why I put TSA drama and long lines. And then post-pandemic, then we had the travel bans and the recent events where, there's like plane crashes and flight cancellations, a spy balloon, and the plane that nosedived, and all these things that are making you afraid to travel, right? And that fear of traveling is putting a damper on all of these other words here that the airport used to symbolize for a lot of people, is this idea of adventure and freedom and escape and exciting travel. So I thought that's interesting. Like, maybe this is what I'm trying to be showed here. But interestingly enough, also, it occurred to me, wait, that TV show Lost, wasn't it about a plane? And so I went and looked it up real quick. And so this is the fun part when you're having these dream analysis and something clicks to something else. And again, in Robert A. Johnson's book, Inner Work, and he's doing the examples of his psychoanalysis of his dream in here, he has this moment too, and it's really cute, where he's just like interpreting this dream that he had about getting mugged when he was going to visit his hometown and moving the money from his front pocket to his back pocket. And then he had this association and they had this breakthrough. And that's that moment where you really start to understand more of the dream from a deeper place, and it starts to click. And that started happening for me here when I noticed this similarity, because at first, again, I was like, I don't like that show. I don't know anything about it. Why is it coming up? And then when I had the scene moved to an airport, I was like, oh, isn't that show about people that had a plane crash? And again, on this word association associated with crashes, plane crashes, recent events. So I just put down the notes from online about the description of the TV show. I'm probably telling you guys something that you already know if you've already watched the show or you know someone who did. But for me, this was like, oh, what's going on here? So the show description, the survivors of Oceanic Flight 815 were 1,000 miles off course when they crashed on a lush, mysterious island. Each person possesses a shocking secret, but they've got nothing on the island itself, which harbors a monstrous security system, a series of underground bunkers, and a group of violent survivalists hidden in the shadows. So it sounds like there's a lot there. I was looking at these ratings down here because that's what we always do, is looking at movies. And it's interesting because this is like such a highly rated show. 85% Rotten Tomatoes, 82% people like the show, 8.3 out of 10 on IMDb. And in the genre, it's, supernatural fiction, mystery. And it's so crazy because that's my genre right now. What I enjoy watching the most is like time travel shows, supernatural type things, and movies that are like thrillers, psychological thrillers, and all that stuff. So I'm kind of like, this actually sounds interesting. Why have I avoided this show? And so I'm like, even more so, like, just what's going on with this dream? Why is it trying to tell me to watch Lost? No, it's got to be deeper. But that was interesting. So let's keep it. The belly. So we move to the belly of the plane. And I associate this with the stomach, the gut. This was obviously a connection to this, where I'm not really supposed to do it, but again, it's kind of loose. It's your own thing. I associate gross with the word gut, the gut, but all of this stuff was coming up, and I thought about the underbelly, vulnerable side, of an animal. The underbelly, you refer to it as their soft, vulnerable side. But then I was like, go back to the belly, and the dream image. So then I started to remember what the feeling of the people and the conflict in that part of the dream was. And it was about stagnancy, the discussion of work and getting stuck, the people, and how I felt in that moment of the dream. We were tucked away in a hidden kind of part of the plane. So the belly of the plane is kind of hidden. The energy was kind of dark. People were unkind, talking about, inaction and work and things like that. But so, the belly is important and often overlooked, and there could be blockages in the belly and the intestines and things like that. So you can see your mind is all over the place, and what it serves up is always interesting. Sometimes it was associations with the scene in the dream. Sometimes it's associations with the words. Sometimes it's associations with me and just my psyche. And it's all okay. It's all okay. You just throw it on there like spaghetti, the spaghetti method, they say. Throw it on the wall, see what sticks. And that's how you kind of find what stands out. And that's where I highlighted as yellow. The underbelly, the vulnerable side, the gut, blockages, and something that's important and overlooked. Uniforms. And just to preface here, I think I went back. Uniforms. I have some Bible verses that came up in this again, so that's just not to imply that this is the religious or religious themed or based process. That's just how I was raised, and so a lot of that is most readily accessible, and those just came up, and it's really helpful for me because also I identify as spiritual, so with a Christian basis, and that Christian spirituality goes a step beyond, which is where I'm reading the teachings of Alice Bailey, and it goes into more occult studies, which again in theosophy it actually incorporates the beauty and the messages from all religions. So there's fruit in all of that, the teachings, and so I'll often refer to things from all different kinds of religions, but here I do have some Bible verses, and that you'll see that is common in occult studies, especially with like Alice Bailey, because she talks about how Christianity did move the human race so far in advancement towards expressing loving kindness, which is an elevated step of consciousness. So, and it refers to the Bible as a book of parables that tells a lot of teachings of the ancients and consciousness and the studies of occult studies and things like that, and where a lot of that comes from, because you'll hear those things in the community, and you'll see that there's a source in the Bible is based on, but it's interpreted differently. Is it literal, or is it telling me about something different? And just like in my last reading where we went over Alice Bailey, where the Bible is talking about, or sorry, Alice Bailey is talking about the temple and the North Star and the East and all that. You'll see a lot of that language there. And so learning how to get familiar with how to interpret and dissect the language of the Bible is really helpful. And so here's an exercise in doing that, long story long, with this dream. Uniforms. I put this as the dream image because when we're in the belly, and you'll notice there's a few words from the same scene, so there's no max or minimum of images that you can use. Of course, it's going to take longer to dissect because you spend a fair amount of time with each of these items, but it's worth it to, again, really make sure you pick those things that stand out for you. So it stood out for me that they were all in uniform and the things people were wearing, because I thought about how long I spent explaining his outfit, but they were all in a uniform and I wasn't. And there was this feeling of, there's this energy of identity and being a part of something, being excluded, all that stuff. So I felt like uniforms was an important symbol or dream image. How I interpret or associate the words when I think about uniforms is think they're boring, unoriginal, associated with systems, school, conformity, order, control, identity, clubs, groupthink, and loss of identity. It's interesting here because although a uniform can give people a sense of identity, by making them unoriginal and not being able to express themselves, there's also a simultaneous loss of identity. But the words that really stood out in this association step was the sense of belonging that you get from wearing a uniform or being on a team, the feeling of sameness, also that exclusivity. So we are part of this team, we're exclusive. And then verses Matthew, verses 1 through 5 in Matthew, and 13 to 14, and a little tidbit about Matthew 6. Matthew 1 through 5. Okay. Judge not, that ye not be judged. For with what judgment ye judge, ye shall be judged. And with what measure you meet, it shall be measured to you again. And why beholdest thou the mote that is in thy brother's eye, but considerest not the beam that is in thine own eye? This is like, I think the King James interpretation online. Of course, there's so many versions, and this has been simplified over the years. It's just like, remove the speck from your own eye before you criticize or judge your brother. Or ultimately it says, you're a hypocrite, first cast the beam out of thine own eye, and then shalt thou see clearly to cast out the mote out from your brother's eye. Again, seeing clearly, having something in your eye, I felt like that was relevant to this, and this idea of judging and not judging, again, with the energy of being excluded or included. And again, the dancers and that idea of judging. I shouldn't be there in that room with those guys, the mechanics, because I'm a woman and they ordered them to dance, and like all that energy was here in the dream. So that Bible verse, those verses stood out to me in terms of the idea of should we or should we not be judging, and how it feels and what we should be focusing on. Understanding what we need to, and let's just work out a little deeper in terms of psychoanalysis, I guess, to summarize. And then verses 13 to 16, enter ye in at the straight gate, for wide is the gate and broad is the way. This is one of my favorite Bible verses. That leadeth, for wide is the gate and broad is the way that leadeth to destruction, and many there be which go in threat, and thereat. I cannot read this type of writing right now, forgive me, because straight is the gate and narrow is the way which leadeth unto life, and few there be that find it. So this is this concept again of how not standing out, being different is going to be kind of alienating. You're going to be a little bit more alone on the unpopular path. Okay, things that I focus on and study, for example, it's not common knowledge. So in terms of belonging and sameness and teams, you feel often like you're not on the same team as a lot of people. In conversation, you're not going to feel connected in that way. So I felt like that resonated with the theme of this dream as well. But in this context of the Bible, it's talking about how the path that leads to destruction is really wide and broad, and there's a lot of people there. You're going to have a lot of company on that. Not to say that anything that's not biblical is destruction in the way that the literal Bible interpreters find that, but just in terms of living a life consciously, you're going to find that being unconscious or asleep or unaware of yourself is going to be more popular. Again, I can't connect with a lot of people. In the past, I couldn't connect with a lot of people on these topics because it wasn't mainstream. Whereas, so it says that straight is the gate and narrow is the way that leadeth unto life, and few there be that find it. So it's more of an isolating journey. You have to be comfortable with the self and being resolute with your decisions. But the one verse in here that's so, like, might be the one reason why the occult and esoteric became so hidden and secretive was probably because of this verse 7:6, which is probably what I dislike the most in the Bible. I don't know if I could say that. All of the fire and brimstone is also kind of it's kind of ick, but this verse says, "Give not that which is holy unto the dogs, neither cast ye your pearls before swine, lest they trample them under their feet and turn again and rend you." So this idea that you're not going to give anything holy, sacred information, right? Knowledge is information, and that's the ultimate currency of life, right? To know something, how to do things, how to get by, knowing who you are. The pearls of all of these teachings, psychology and self-development, don't cast that before swine. That's your pearls, and it says don't cast that before swine lest they trample it under their feet and turn against you, right? So this is the idea where it came the concept of keep the secrets, keep this information secret from the masses because they're swine. And this comes back to me as the biggest contradiction, because just before, it's like we can't leave out where it talks about being a hypocrite. Take the beam out of your own eye. Do not judge others. Who are you to determine who gets information and who doesn't? Okay, and who are you to determine who is swine and that you are not? So this idea of teams and the exclusivity of information, all of this was relevant to me in this whole area of Matthew 7. It's really interesting. But I gave the context here is that right after that verse in 7 and 8, I indented it because it brings it back to wholeness. It says, "Ask and it shall be given you, seek and ye shall find, knock and it shall be opened unto you. For every one that asketh receiveth, and he that seeketh findeth, and to him that knocketh it shall be opened." So there's no need to reserve information and decide who's better or worse. There are no better or worse. We're all equals in unity consciousness and Christ consciousness, right? So this idea of holding information from certain people about how we can live and thrive, it's contrary to our nature, and it's not conscious behavior. So this reason is because that anyone who wants to know better, wants to be better, will be given that information. You will be attracted to, say, a video like this if you want to learn about psychoanalysis, and if you want to learn about how to interpret your own dreams and learn who you are without having to go to pay a professional or whatever, or as you work with a professional, you can do this on your own to see if you can help them to help you, however it works out best. But the understanding that it's not about protecting or coveting information from people, and that's why people are so lost right now, you could say, in terms of consciousness, is because this information is not widely available in terms of people finding it without the path of religious, with a religious frame, which indeed the Theosophical Society does teach us that this information and these principles predate religion, in fact. So it's super interesting. And I'm of the belief that even how it says in that the Tibetan introduction to the Alice Bailey books, it says like people who are not meant to hear it or aren't ready to receive it, not meant to hear it because it's not the time to receive it. We never push anything down anyone's throats. They usually fall asleep by now. They're not interested, and that's okay. So you don't have to covet and protect information. You just deliver it, and those who are interested will find it. Again, that what is it? What do you call those? You know, the student, when the student's ready, the teacher will appear. Those kinds of things, which I love also about these studies. So that's it here. That was a lot. And let's continue on to the next association. I guess the last one. The eyes and the ears. And again, there was another Bible verse from Matthew that came up, which was also interesting to me that they were in this same area. I have not read the Bible through and through, but it was just like, I search it and I'm like, oh, it's there too. But there's a couple places actually in the Bible where you'll see this phrase, which we'll get to, those with eyes to see and the ears to hear. And this is a very common phrase in the occult studies and the esoteric, and which you'll see the secret societies and things like that. They say this, those with the eyes to see and the ears to hear. And you're like, where does that mean? Where does it come from? It's also in the Bible, which means it's also part of the ancient teachings. The associations really quickly about what came to mind in terms of eyes and ears. For me, the concept in the dream was this idea of feeling seen, eye contact, associate that with respect, feeling heard, associate with active listening. And then the concept of losing my hearing in the dream and things like that. And music, the divine senses, having the feeling that I felt in the dream of loss of hearing, the pain of the screeching, the planes, the loud noise, having thick skin. I'm like blinking, what does that have to do with anything? Oh, this was in my previous word associations and the concept. So I kept it here as well, because I was like, is this again the idea or the concept of my subconscious telling me that something about having thick skin when you're hearing or listening to what other people have to say? I don't know. I just left it there. The idea of connection, your eyes, your sight, and your hearing connects you to others. These are senses that are often taken for granted. In the dream, I was betrayed by these individuals. So in terms of that conflict, I ended up losing my hearing. It became a matter of survival, and I need those senses. We need our senses for survival. So again, it's part of the divine senses. And when this finally ultimately came to me, thinking of this phrase, those with the eyes to see and the ears to hear, and how it is part of the occult initiation and learning about that phrase. And so I put here from Matthew 13, verses 9 through 16, kind of the source of where this came from, or one of the sources. Okay, this is Jesus speaking. He says, who hath ears to hear, let him hear. And this is said again multiple times in the Bible when Jesus is teaching the disciples through parable. Those with the ears to hear, let them hear. And the disciples came and said unto him, why speakest unto them in parables? He answered and said unto them, because it is given unto you to know the mysteries of the kingdom of heaven, but to them it is not given. For whosoever hath, to him shall be given, and he shall have more abundance. But whosoever hath not, from him shall be taken away, even that he hath. I'm so sorry. Therefore speak I to them in parables, because they seeing see not, and hearing they hear not, neither do they understand. So this concept of those with the eyes to see and the ears to hear get the information, and those who don't get the information. It's a simple sorting process, just like with consciousness. It's a part of the awakening. Are you conscious or are you unconscious? Are you awake or are you asleep? Do you want to learn or do you not want to learn? Do you want to advance in life, self-development, or do you not care about it? And it's not a good or bad. There's no judgment. It's a sorting process. And in the life experiences that we have, follow that. You will learn through the lessons, or you will learn through applying the teachings. There's different. It's a choice. And in them is fulfilled the prophecy of Esaias, which saith, by hearing ye shall hear and shall not understand, and seeing ye shall see and shall not perceive. For this people's heart is waxed gross, and their ears are dull of hearing, and their eyes have closed, lest at any time they should see with their eyes and hear with their ears, and should understand with their heart, and should be converted, and I should heal them. But blessed are your eyes, for they see, and your ears, for they hear. So again, he's telling his disciples, you're here, you're listening, so you have the eyes to see and the ears to hear, and I'm going to impart this wisdom to you. So again, this concept for me was something that came up in this dream. That's it. So next step in the dream interpretation process is working through the dream dynamics, where you go through each of those dream symbols and then you interpret what part of me is this. So again, when you're looking at a dream and you have these other people, the dream is never about the other person that you're interacting with. It's always reverted back to you, because this is your unconscious speaking to you, your inner world telling you, hey, this is what I want you to know, and here I'm going to give it to you in this mini cinema experience that you're going to have tonight while you sleep. And should you happen to remember that and have dream recall, wake up, write it down, and we can work with it. And then you can understand what the unconscious is trying to tell you. Pretty cool. So this is the Jungian concept again, taught to us through Robert A. Johnson in inner work. So here you're working with phrases. You're answering the question, what part of me is this? And here's where it gets a little personal, a little deep. So I have some references so as well. This is part of the process, so I'm very comfortable just sharing it. And that's why I got my shirt on today as well. Because this is important. This is what we have to do in order to grow. So let's read Lost. So what part of me is this? I said, this is the part of me that's doubtful. This is my fearful side. This part of me does not feel safe and protected. This is my worry. This is my paranoia. This is the part of me that avoids making decisions. And that came up again later too. Actually, that should be yellow. Going back into when I finally cracked this dream, that part was really, that stood out as well. In terms of the solution, the resolution, I was able to connect this, and you'll see how later. This part of me craves help and guidance. This part of me craves a role model. And this led me to the thought here where we have yellow. This part of me is aware that she was raised without a father. This is my inner child. And for me, that was so profound, because it was like, oh my gosh, my subconscious is delivering me up these feelings and these emotions to something that I don't usually think about normally. On a day-to-day basis, I never really go through life thinking, oh, I was raised this way, or I don't have that relationship. But subconsciously, these things affect us. And that's why a lot of times in psychology and therapy, you have people that are working through that scenario specifically, right? The idea of the parent-child dynamic, and having a father figure, not having it, having a mother, not having it, having both people and having trauma. There's not like a perfect way, but there is something there. And so it's interesting that I came to terms with the idea that there is an inner child, which we learn common in spirituality, talk about the inner child wounds and all that stuff. What is that? You're basically, it's that version of yourself that never goes away, because you might be 50 years old and in your head you're like, I feel like I'm a kid, because that person stays that way. And in psychology, you learn that person kind of gets cut off in terms of maturity and growth when there is a certain trauma that happens at some stage of your life. So the inner child in that case has wounds and needs some healing. So that part where the psyche, the mental development kind of stagnates at a certain level, but you have a healthy childhood, you have a healthy yada yada, you feel that your inner child is not wounded, so to speak. It's just the version of you that you can remember when you're thinking back on fond memories. But in cases where there was wounding, or there was some lack or limitations or trauma, this is where you need to work on and revisit. And you do a lot through psychoanalysis and therapy and things like that. So in this case, my inner child felt lost, and because it wanted a role model in terms of that masculine guidance for help and guidance and things like that. And this, again, brings you back to the idea of the mechanic in the dream, which we'll go to in the next slide. But how this plays out is that version of me is fearful, has a lot of worry, has a lot of paranoia. And I don't know if that's because of the mothering aspect I had. I was raised by a woman, and women naturally go through world thinking that you need a protector, right? So this goes back to all these things, archetypes, traditional gender roles, things like that. So if you don't have the male guardian, you go through life, if you're out at night, you've got to be cognizant of that. If you're out shopping by yourself, you got to be aware of that. Like, how do I protect myself? And it can lead to these feelings of worry, paranoia, and fear. Not to say that that can't be healed, but understanding that if there's a point in my life, in my development, where I didn't get this self-awareness that might be imparted by a father, it could be imparted by a mother too, but that energy that tells you you're safe, you're protected, and here's what you do to feel safe and protected. Moving on to the mechanic. So again, there's the mechanics in my dream that actually I go to for help, but in this dynamics, we're still searching for the part of me and that is a mechanic, because we have all things within us. And so again, that's what's cool about this step, is we're taking that dream image and associating it back to a place within us. So this is where I get to feel empowered again. So the other one, if that other interpretation breaks me down and makes me feel like, oh, I have some inner child healing to do, this part brings you back up and gives you that full spectrum where it's like, no, I do have an inner mechanic. And what is that about me? This part of me knows how to solve problems, because I do have a part of me that knows how to solve problems. I did develop and continue to mature. But this is all working with the subconscious. It's trying to tell you something. So we're still trying to get to that thing. This is my logical reasoning side. People come to this side of me for advice. This side of me sometimes seems to intimidate others, even when I'm too, too expressive of or too sharing of ideas and advice. People take that as, like the know-it-all, right? The know-it-all kind of dynamic. And, I'm like, that couldn't be further from the truth. It's just that some people are excited about sharing information, but you have to understand that some people might have different wounding or different imprints that make them feel a certain way, and we all have different triggers. So understanding when to hold back and to wait until you're asked, for advice and things like that helps with these kind of feelings of just interacting with other universes, other worlds, people or other worlds orbiting around us. And that's just how we learn to adapt, through self-awareness and self-development. I have used this part of me for protection, my inner mechanic. This side of me has gotten me through so many things in life. I noticed that this part of me is very calm, just like the mechanic in the dream. He was calm. The problem solver is calm. This part of me is not feminine. So again, relating to the negative aspect with where this energy intimidates people, sometimes it's because this society is kind of still shaking off some of that old idea that a woman should be seen and not heard, that men are the speakers and the leaders primarily, and that women don't have as much to offer or to share. There's been like equal rights movement and all this stuff that you're already aware of, to try and even that playing field, to understand that no, there's a masculine and a feminine within each of us. And the masculine side of us is the thinking logical side, left brain. And the feminine is the receiving, creative, intuitive, emotional side that is within all of us, the feminine. And together we are whole. And like we're talking about in our studies and reading Alice Bailey, talking about how we become that whole person, that monad, when we integrate and live from a balanced and healthy masculine and feminine integrated self. The father, the mother, and the spirit, the first three rays of divinity and expression. It's really cool when it all comes together in terms of psychology and esoteric studies and all of these things. So this part of me is not feminine, and even though that has a negative connotation in maybe the mainstream, like, oh, you can't be so smart, or you can't be so talkative or verbal and expressive about your thoughts and opinions, I know that this is my inner masculine, my inner divine masculine, and that it is healthy at the end of the day to have that developed, but to also see if there's an imbalance. Like, am I also giving enough time to learning about my needs and my feelings and my emotions? And I do find that I do spend a lot more time here in my logical reasoning side, and that's based on my birth chart, my blueprint, and things like that. And so this is helpful again, so that we can learn how we can balance that out. Then I came to this interesting point, that this is my father. This is my brain, my mind. So this is your logical side. What part of me is this? I came like down to really narrowing this down. The mechanic in my dream is my brain, my mind. This is my masculine energy. This is my father. The kingdom of God is within me. And we learn again through the Alice Bailey, the teachings that we're learning, the brain, the kingdom of heaven is, the most high, the highest place in the human body, the brain, the mind that connects us to spirit. And I and my father are one. So those are just some interesting things that came to mind again as I was doing the dynamics step of this process. The address. So in that part of the dream where I was trying to find an address, this is where it got a lot deeper and I had my breakthrough moments. In the dream, the part of me that is the address in real life is where I go to be alone. It's where I feel comfortable. It's my safe space. Remember how I associated the address with the safe house? And then I started to explore my dynamics, what part of me it is based on what I resonated with most in the word association step of the dream analysis. This is my introvert, which is really my dominant side. This is how I escape anxiety, which I do experience on a daily basis. This side of me is socially abnormal. And that's part of me that goes away, doesn't talk to people like for years. I don't talk to anybody really, most of the time, like I stay to myself. But there are times when I come out and I do associate and I do enjoy it, but on the majority of it, and it's funny, at my last job, we did the, the INFJ, ISD, the Myers-Briggs, the test type indicator about, and it gives you your 4-letter identifiers. And mine, when it got printed out, my boss looked at it and she was very heavy on the extroverted side, and her expression in her daily life was really excited and very extroverted and just an awesome, cool person. And it gave you this bar chart to show how much you lean towards extroversion and introversion. And again, that's also based on Jung and the archetypes. And you're not extroverted and introverted in terms of how much you're talking and connecting and talking with people, because her boss, who gave the presentation, is a Myers-Briggs licensed teacher, shared with us that she's extroverted as the chart shows, but she's actually really shy. So an extroverted person can very much be shy, but the difference is, in terms of Jung and the psychology, is that where you get energized from. Are you energized by sharing your energy with lots of people, or does that deplete you? Or are you energized from your world within? Do you get your energy from taking time to yourself and exploring things and your thoughts and feelings in a very internal way? Or does being expressive and having a conversation, does that stimulate you and give you more energy? And people are just, it's a 50-50, and you're just going to be one or the other. And both are okay. It's fine. There's nothing wrong with you. But again, society labels extroversion as good and introversion as bad. And you'll see parents, how they child rear, they'll try and lead you up one way or another because they feel like, if you're inside, you need to get out more and whatnot. And there's a lot to be learned here by understanding these dynamics and how to nurture someone who just has that kind of biological makeup. Going back to why I said that, my boss gave me my printout of my Myers-Briggs, and it was like, I was even shocked. The bar chart was completely like all the way on all these different items, like the test, because you answer like hundreds of questions, and mine was just like completely on the introverted side. Like it was, and how I am, I'm expressive and I do like to joke and connect with people and all these things. But when I do it, I'm usually asking, I have deeper connections, and that's what it's about. Introversion, I go deep in conversation. So when I connect with a person, one of the questions is at a party, would you rather be like a social butterfly? And there's those people that will spend a little time having a surface conversation with all these people and they're feeling good by that. Or are you the person that'll have a deep, intimate conversation with one person and spend time with that person or a few people and having deep conversations and connections and really getting to know them? And you'll find that the different psychological makeups is some people struggle with small talk and some people thrive with small talk, and all that plays a part. And how, I was just all over there, and she was just like, whoa, Sabri, I'm so sorry for making you get up and give your speech and and then the presentation where we had to do introductions. And it's funny because it's also, again, like this idea that you don't, being introverted doesn't mean that you can't speak and project and connect with others. It just means that it takes a lot more out of you if your energy comes from within and being more reclusive, being alone and having that time to yourself. So it's important to understand your makeup so that you know how to refuel your spirit and your energy. Going into, I know you're probably running because this has been on the screen for a long time and I haven't addressed it. This is where it gets interesting because society would label this part of me as autistic. And I identified the address, this part of me that retreats and escapes from people and stays very much, long lengths of time to myself. And even in terms of friend groups, I have my primary friends, like I see them maybe once a year, like birthdays and holidays, and they know about it. It's a running joke, but we have deep connections where we just pick up where we left off, and that's really great. But I also do a sifting through. Recently, I did a sifting through of, really where my energy is and how relationships impact that. And there's that saying about the 5 or 6 closest people to you say a lot about who you are. And so being more selective with who you are, because that is an indication or a reflection of you. And for me, it's very important that I have to stay mindful of that. I have to have that core resonation. These core values have to be a match, and who I spend time with and what they're aligned with also has to be spiritually in sync, because this isn't a game for me. This is very important to be someone who takes consciousness seriously. Not that it has to be everything and anything that you work through. Like I said, I have my friends and I hang out with them. We have a great time. We'll do the party thing, whatever. It's just understanding how much that takes out of me physically and having a group of people that support and understand that. And it brings me to these yellow highlighted points as well, because this is associated with high functioning autism spectrum disorder. It's very much a part of it. Again, relating to the association of the address, this is when I go nonverbal. This is another thing that's associated with autism spectrum disorder. And the last one I'll just touch on, I did a little bit, but it brings us full circle to from stigma to healing, right? So one thing is stigmatized, the other thing is empowering. And that's where psychology meets spirituality and the missing link, which Alice Bailey talks about a lot, or the Tibetan talks about through Alice Bailey in the books that we're reading, is that just like Christianity brought society to a certain point, but needs to go further in order to really do more great work, psychology and even science in those fields need to understand and understand spirituality and all of these ancient teachings so that they can go further. Because where psychology would leave you with a label, spirituality gives you the fundamental or the underlying dynamics that can really help a person grow and really understand themselves and really understand what to do with the label and not just have the stigma. So I'll go back to some explaining here to understand what is autism, what is high functioning autism, what does it mean to go nonverbal, yada, 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 real quick by jumping over to sharing some of those screens that I have over here on the far right, your left maybe, or the far right. I'm not sure if this is mirrored, but here's the links and the articles. I'll link them again in the description. And then a discussion at the end about the spiritual side of it. So let's really quickly share what the CDC, so what the mainstream says about autism. This is from the CDC website, as you can see. What is autism spectrum disorder? Autism spectrum disorder is a developmental disability caused by differences in the brain. Some people with ASD have a known difference, such as a genetic condition. Other causes are not yet known. Scientists believe there are multiple causes of ASD that act together to change the most common ways people develop. We still have much to learn about these causes and how they impact people with ASD. So basically, they have no idea. I'm just kidding. People with ASD may behave, communicate, interact, and learn in ways that are different from most other people. There is often nothing about how they look that sets them apart from other people. The abilities of people with ASD can vary significantly. For example, some people with ASD may have advanced conversation skills, whereas others may be nonverbal. Some people with ASD need a lot of help in their daily lives. Others can work and live with little to no support. So again, this is why they've encompassed this as a spectrum. So there's high functioning, there's low functioning, needing a lot of support, needing not so much support, being extremely verbal to being completely nonverbal. It's a spectrum. So that's why it's been labeled and changed over the years to just be this encompassing category of a developmental disability that could have certain symptoms and signs. And to go a little bit more into this idea of nonverbal, there's also an experience for some people who are verbal, highly conversationally advanced in verbal, having episodes where there's this phenomenon called autistic burnout, which is a lot of people, especially since females, because autism is mostly, I don't know if it says it here, but it's primarily diagnosed as boys over women. ASD occurs in all racial, ethnic, and socioeconomic groups. It is more than 4 times more common among boys than among girls. But this fact here has led to significant misdiagnosis of women because they have what is called autistic masking, where you learn to cope or mimic other people's behaviors because of those social developmental where you are, I don't know how they describe it, developmental disability in terms of you're not learning to connect or communicate in the same way as other people do. Small talk and certain things, but it could be, again, on the spectrum from severe to not so severe. I'll speak from my own case. It's just like certain times I'll think about, yeah, like you're just wired different if you're thinking about certain topics because and you're in a group. I'll think of this example. I used to be when I first started dating my boyfriend back in going to the parents' house and sitting with the family, and they talked in movie quotes, like it was hilarious, but I just didn't know it because I didn't watch a lot of movies. And they literally would have conversations of all movie quotes, and I felt really disconnected from that because I didn't know how to contribute. And so I would get really in my head about that. And it's this like understanding that it's not a personal thing. It's just like a mainstream versus not. Its interests are different, and you become very isolated in your interests. But in the same way, that means that they were very isolated in their interests and they express through that. But for a person who does not connect in that more mainstream way, you feel disconnected. And it could be that simple, but you're very much in your head about it. And women, in terms of this diagnosis gap, will learn to do what's called coping and masking. And so we'll be like, okay, everybody does this, so I'm going to learn how to do that, and then I'm going to act that way, and then I'm going to get by so I can be passing. And it works because there's this misdiagnosis category, so where you'll go through and you'll get by and you can develop the skills to be passing in terms of normal. And whereas boys who suffer from autism, they just kind of disconnect and they don't interact and things like that. And that's what the studies have shown. And so they'll be diagnosed as on the spectrum more commonly, although there's lots of girls out there that probably are on the spectrum, and then they grow up into women that are not diagnosed and just understand later in life, like myself, and you find out that, oh, there's a reason for it, right? But the coping and masking idea is that it's not sustaining. You can't do it for a long time. So then that's when you get autistic burnout, and then this experiences of nonverbal behavior where you, again, would retreat. So you're not going to be, maybe you either lose speech altogether or you just don't have the energy to connect in the same way and at the same functioning level that you've been when you're coping and masking, because it does deplete you so much. And imagine how not having that understanding of why that's happening to you can be really hard in terms of connecting with other people that don't get it either, because they're just like, why are you disappearing? And you're just like, I really just don't have anything to give right now. I'm burnt out and I need to replenish. And it's important for this stuff to be normalized so that people can learn to be okay with just how they work and understanding how other people work. And so we can just kind of move forward, understanding that people are a spectrum and it's not a disorder. The thing that's out of order is how society understands all of the shades and flavors of people and who we are, and inner work and esoteric psychology and all the stuff that we're doing and learning. is so that we can understand that. Through Alice Bailey and the 7 rays, we understand that each of the 7 rays is a starting point for how humanity expresses divine nature through all of these different shades, and how that is broken up, just how a light spectrum is shown through a prism and shines out in all these different colors and gradients. That's why we're all so different. Then you mix that with astrology and the birth chart and understanding all of these things, I can have so much deeper of an understanding of who I am than anything like a diagnosis could ever give me, right? This is only a piece of the puzzle. And that's where the work of Alice Bailey was so critical in terms of predicting that when psychology meets spirituality, that's when you're really going to see progress. When science meets spirituality, it's really going to meet progress, because it can only get you so far, right? In understanding something, and to take you further, you have to have that understanding. So let's jump over here to this tab. This is from WebMD, where it explains for you what is high-functioning autism. High-functioning autism isn't an official medical term or diagnosis. It's an informal one some people use when they talk about people with an autism spectrum disorder who can speak, read, write, and handle basic life skills like eating and getting dressed. They can live independently. For a long time, however, only people with severe symptoms were diagnosed with autism. Starting in the 90s, milder forms were recognized, including high-functioning autism and Asperger's syndrome, which share many of the same symptoms. Then in 2013, the American Psychiatric Association grouped the autism-related disorders into one term, autism spectrum disorder, or ASD. Okay, and then one last thing right here is, before we go into the spiritual side, this is the clinical psychological side, which is important to know as well. This is an article from this website, The Mighty, which is really cool. This website, again, I don't do any kind of sponsorship or anything, get any credit for this, but this is something I found that was really cool. The Mighty, it's a website where you can get health answers from people who live it every day. It's a community of people that actually have certain, mental health or disabilities or things like that, and they can post their own stories and their articles, and you can ask questions and get information from them. Health is so much more than doctor's visits or a diagnosis. The community helps you navigate life as it happens in between those doctor visits. And oh my gosh, health is hard, but it never has to be lonely. So that's kind of the gist of it right here. You can join this community. The power of the patient voice. We make health about people by bringing together the stories and lived experiences of those who've been there, penned by our community and curated by our editors. The collections below feature some of our best, most helpful articles on the health topics that matter to you, and it covers everything from depression, anxiety, bipolar, disability, migraine, suicide, all kinds of stuff. It's really, really cool. So there's this article here from this gal who talks about the experience of what it's like to go nonverbal as a verbal autistic. It's really intense how she explains it, but she does touch on some of the things that are really common that you might relate to, like I myself, when you have that feeling of burnout and have what's called an autistic meltdown. She says, as I sit staring blankly ahead in the midst of my autistic meltdown, words course through my mind at the speed of light. All of my coping mechanisms seem to have vanished, so the words are very negative. I am being brought back to traumatic memories and events. The voices of all the people who've abused me have come out to play. I find myself back in my childhood home, having a PTSD episode about being shoved in my room, having the door locked when all I wanted was a hug. The scariest part, and that's interesting to me because it also it points to childhood trauma as being a link to autism, which again, we learned from the CDC website, they really don't have a handle on this and an understanding. So that's an interesting point of the study. The scariest part for me is when I try to yell for help, but I can't. I can feel myself trying to push the words from my head and out of my mouth, but it just won't happen. I might be able to repeat a phrase over and over, but I can't control what phrase it is, nor can I stop it. And this makes me think of the meltdown that happened to Howard Hughes in the movie The Aviator. Is an amazing movie. I love that movie with Leonardo DiCaprio depicting Howard Hughes and kind of how he had his mental breakdown. And I don't know if they ever diagnosed him as autistic or having this, but he would go into these fits and he would have these tics and he would say the same word over and over again. He also had a version of obsessive compulsive disorder, OCD, where he would have this hand washing and things like that, these behaviors. But again, society doesn't understand it. So he ended up becoming a recluse, staying in his mansion. He did not come out. He locked himself in a room, and he had to have things happen in a very specific routine order. But how much could we help people by having this understanding and normalizing the differences and expecting different things from people in society who have just a different way of living life? So he repeats the phrase in that movie, show me all the blueprints, show me all the blueprints, show me all the blueprints. There's in all these things. And Leonardo DiCaprio just does a freaking expert job at portraying Howard Hughes and explaining his story. And if you have a chance to watch The Aviator, it's amazing. So let me just continue really quick with a few of this. I think this is about all I want to read. I'm usually very verbal. I often have a hard time processing, and sometimes words can take very long to run down the tunnel and out of my mouth, but I can make it happen. There are times, however, I go completely nonverbal. This usually happens in times of burnout or during a meltdown. My vessel just shuts down and I feel like a shell of a human. It doesn't usually last very long, but there is always the next meltdown glimmering on the horizon. There are days when I am having a meltdown every hour, which greatly increases the chance of me going nonverbal. The basic difference for me between verbal and nonverbal autism is the actual ability to physically use their voice, not the words inside their head. So again, just check out this website. I'll put links and everything in there, but this is all stuff that's been helpful for me in hearing, other people and having mirrored experiences and understanding more. So like when I feel depleted, I just need some me time, and then I can understand. And that's also the same as going nonverbal, because there's times where I'm not talking to anyone, right? Because I'm just with me, but I'm recharging. I'm still happy. I'm still productive and still able to function, and sometimes even better because I've had that chance to recharge. Whereas someone who has that extroversion tendency will get more of that fuel, and those are the people you might see going out with their friends and groups of people multiple times a week and feeling good doing that. It's just because that makeup is refueling for them. And this brings me over to the spiritual interpretation, going back just before this to our PowerPoint, where I'm seeing that we're approaching an hour. So thank you so much for watching this, and I hope it uploads to YouTube, okay? But this is a big one for me again. You can spend months with a dream analysis, so I'm going to give it the justice of that time as well. So this last point here on the screen, where I really came to a spiritual harmony with this information, was that this isn't just the part of me that is autistic. Society would call it that. This is the part of me that is energized from within, the address where I go when I escape. And I thought about this in terms of the esoteric arts of tarot, how we've read through or how we've used tarot association in our study of Alice Bailey as well, to show that they're flashcards of the occult, to talk about the different steps of the hero's journey, which is every human being going through these phases in life. And the major arcana has a card called the Hermit. And the Hermit card in the tarot is understood as doing just that, going away for soul searching and self-development. And it's so interesting because, again, in spirituality, it doesn't have this shame and this negative connotation. It's just a part of life and a part of how a person goes through their journey and their development, and how this is very commonly seen in the spiritual awakening, where people will, you'll detach and you lose certain associations and friendships, like I was talking about a moment ago, whatever you just resonate with, and you learn to just evolve and shed things that no longer serve you, and you kind of just move in a new way, and you allow what feeds your soul. You have say yes to that and have more of that in your life, and what doesn't resonate, you kind of drift away from. And they talk about that in terms of the hermit as a phase in life where you might find that you are in your own company more. And I was thinking about that in terms of this actual condition, and it actually mirrors it a lot. So the Hermit tarot card in an upright position, and this is from that website we'll pop back to in just a second, It generally indicates, so when you're using tarot card and you pull this card, it indicates that you're entering a period of soul searching, self-reflection, and spiritual enlightenment. You may find that you need time alone to gain a deeper understanding of yourself, to remove yourself from the daily grind in order to discover your true spiritual self, contemplate your existence, your direction in life, or your values. The Hermit can also indicate isolating yourself or withdrawing into oneself in order to recover from a difficult situation. This major arcana trump card, sorry about that. This major arcana trump card suggests that you may be going through an antisocial phase where you just don't want to interact with people as much as you normally would. The Hermit is wise, mature, and knowledgeable. And this part is where I thought, stigma. Maybe an indication that someone seeking, maybe an indication of someone seeking services of a counselor or psychiatrist. And then it goes to finish, this is a time to focus on yourself and meeting your own needs. While it's true that this might be a sign, so if you're a tarot card reader and you're like someone using it for divination, and you pull the card for someone and you're talking to them about their situation, you're like, oh, you might be going through a time where you need to be alone, it might be awakening. So you might have had some kind of trigger in life that's making you step away from society, like the Howard Hughes example. And you might be needing or seeking the services of a counselor or a psychiatrist. But again, I would really just want to marry these two philosophies and understanding that, yes, there might be some mental health trigger here, but there's going to be something deeper on the spiritual side too, that we're going to see through this whole dream analysis, that there's two parts to this. It's not just the physical outcome or the physical expression, but there's something else going on here too. So we'll go back really quick and I'll share this website where this came from. This is the tarot guide. This is just, again, they go through each of the tarot cards with the meaning of them and things like that. And this is where that excerpt was pulled from directly. So I'll again put all of those things in the description, and we're going to visit that screen that I just popped on in just a second as we finish this up here. We're on slide 13. The next, I know this is a big one. Thank you so much for watching. I don't know why I keep saying that. I'm just like, I don't know this how people sit through stuff, but I'm like, I can watch videos that are super long. Just put it at 2 times speed. I might sound like a chipmunk, but it's all good. The dancers. So this is the ones that interrupted me trying to find the address and go to my safe space, right, in the dream. This is the part of me, again, we're looking at dynamics. What part of me is this? This is the part of me that entertains others. I enjoy this part of me in small doses. This part of me wants to be normal. And then on the yellow side, some notes. In the previous dream that I did the analysis on, the dancers were also there, and I put this note that this side of me is bubbly. And again, I feel like even that interpretation or that dream, the overall meaning was a little bit more surface level. So I just thought, oh, this is my bubbly side and blah, blah, blah. This dream went so much deeper. I put that this is my alter ego. This is interesting because you see this a lot in the Hollywood scene where these people are getting these alter egos. They talk about it. There's that Beyonce has Sasha Fierce. There's that basketball player, I think his name was Draymond, who went stuck and froze on camera. He has this alter ego. I think it was him, I'm not sure. But all these, and there's more and more entertainers that are creating these alter egos. And I think there's something so rich in psychology that needs to be done on that whole industry to understand what's going on. A lot of it is dealing with the very, unaddressed fascination with Satanism that's going on in that industry as well. But these people are inviting in these altars, these spirits that allow them to perform and allow them to be energized to push out this major productivity, this unhuman energy, this supernatural energy that they're summoning forth, using so that they can perform better than ever, be these stars, right? These stars, because we call upon the energy of the stars, the heavens, the bodies, all of this stuff, this esoteric energy. So you're putting forth these altar, but for me, so we do it in different degrees, right? When we put on a persona that's acceptable, we have an alter ego too. So this is me pulling and channeling forth an energy that can entertain others and be what they need. Like I said, in the dynamic where I want to get by in a conversation, so I have to watch more movies that I don't really resonate with, just so that I can learn some of these lines and go into a group dynamic. It sounds so crazy when you think about it, but that's how the autistic mind kind of works. It's like very like trying to play the part of passing as a normal person, because society will not accept you as normal. And that's where we need to change. The alter ego, this part of me feels like an obligation, and this part of me is quickly feels drained. And that goes back to understanding, okay, well, if I learn about my Myers-Briggs, I learned that from the Jung archetypes, from the Jung studies of personalities, that my energy is fueled in a different way. So of course, when I'm projecting this persona that's very extroverted and does this, song and dance routine for others, of course that's going to really feel drained. And you see that in these supernatural videos and things, not videos, but movies and things where someone channels this energy. Once that energy leaves them, they're very depleted, they're very exhausted, right? Because it pulls on you, because you're pulling from a different source to project that, and it's not sustainable. But it gets you through certain circumstances. So that's why you use it. It's a form of coping in terms of everyday, the everyday person. Moving on to the airport. Let me make sure there was nothing else there. Yeah, the airport, I put this asterisk here because it connected to something else. I put some of these in red. Again, I just color coded it in certain ways that would kind of trigger things for me, where things connected with a word association or something that I wanted to go back to. In my dream, how it shifted to the airport, what part of me is this? And you do that too with a place. What part of me is this place? You kind of just have to fall into this sort of interesting way of thinking, which I love about this dream work process, is it makes you think a little differently. What part of me is an airport? Going through that first step of the word association helps you with this, because I'll just go back to those words and I'll be like, okay, what part of me is like these words? Where do I recognize traits like this in me? And he gives a couple of ways on how you could frame the question of this step a little differently to help start this process. And once I got that flowing, I came up with these sentences, that the airport in me is, this is the part of me that's opposite of the address. Again, the address is my safe space where I go to retreat. The airport is more of just who I am when I'm expressing my extroverted side. That's an authentic extroverted side. So you're going to see the contrast again from the dancers. This is more of an artificial version of me that fits a societal norm to perform, to, just like in the dream, the dancers came through for the purpose of performing for the masculines that were in the room. It was the part of me that comes to perform to fit the needs of whatever conversation I'm in, where people need from me to give small talk, when for me that's very unnatural. The airport is actually the part of me that actually is extroverted, because there is a little bit in there, right? There's part of me, like in my natural state, I like to hang out and goof around. It's not all deep and all that stuff. I do have a full encompassing birth chart like we all do. So I said, this is my Sagittarius ascendant. So my Sagittarius rising is two-part. The Sagittarian energy is very much so adventurous. It's ruled by Jupiter, which is the good luck planet, but also the adventure planet, and moving and traveling and going places far abroad. So this is why I do like traveling. And that's why the airport for me was a symbol of adventure and fun things, because I do like to go places and see things. And it's also like the Taurus energy. You want to go see museums and art and all of this stuff. So, but the Sagittarius is also this philosopher, this philosophical, big thinking, big picture ideas, which I do think I embrace that a lot more. But there is a part of me that is this vibrant Sagittarius energy. It's a fire sign, and that fire makes you extroverted. So, and the ascendant is basically how you're seen by other people. So it's very interesting that some people's first impression of me, though I am all this other stuff, this deep introvert, the world-facing view, which is why astrology is so fascinating, the world-facing view can be so contrary to that, which is why we learn that you never really know a person based on their surface level views. And they show this in suicide warnings and things like that, trigger warnings. But they say that because you should never just judge a person by their smiling face. You really need to get to know a person. You really need to kind of ask them deeper questions to really understand who they are and what they're going on, because you never know if you're interacting with them or a persona, an alter ego that they're putting on just to cope and get by. And it's important to understand the whole person, and not just, again, like even with celebrities and social media, they're putting on an act because it's their job. You have to not hold them to that identity, because they're so much more to a person, just like with us. So again, the airport is the part of me that doesn't hold back, doesn't mind standing out, because like the major part of me is just like, I don't like to, anyways, this is my extroverted side. This part of me is creative and courageous. This part of me expresses myself. And then I noticed I am this side of me around those I know and trust, just naturally. And it's not depleting. It comes naturally, and it's cool. I said, this part of me wants to connect with others. So it's not that I'm completely against it. It's not that I don't like interacting with others, because like I said, when I go to that once a year birthday party, I have a blast. I have a great time, but I just might need to go in my cave for 6 months afterwards. Just kidding. So over here in my notes, I referred to the word association of the airport to kind of get some of these deeper thoughts about this step, going deeper, digging deeper into the dream. I had a mix of joy and excitement words that shifted into fear and distrust words when I did the word association step of the airport. I realized that my interests and hobbies that make me feel happy, creative, and self-expressing have been rejected or misunderstood when I kind of share them in certain social settings over the years, or my interests aren't really like the mainstream interests. I have a history of bullying and trauma, childhood wounds that manifested as a mild social disorder. So this is where we're talking about the autism, and like the girl, there could be sources in our past that can trigger this, and we need to help psychology catch up and bridge that gap in understanding what contributes to this whole person and these disorders. I've learned to cope by expressing a normalized extroversion persona, which is the dancers. However, the invented version cannot be upheld for long. It feels inauthentic, and that's another reference to what autistic burnout is. People go through the stage of coping and masking, and you end up reaching an inevitable burnout, because all of that energy that you're putting out in order to get by is further and further exhausting and depleting for that soul, that life force energy. So it leads to a burnout if you don't balance that out. And having this awareness can do a lot of good, and even just understanding how that works. So for me, the airport allowed me to see that this part of me is normal and would meet societal norms and expectations. However, my defense mechanism, which is what my interpretation of ASD is in some ways, it's a way to defend yourself against the ways that society doesn't allow you to feel normal. So you have these different traits and these different physical symptoms that are the aftermath of that. Not to say that you are this person and only this person with this mental or this disability or things like that. If you're on this side of the spectrum, of course, I can't speak for the full spectrum. We're only understanding lenses and frames of ourselves that we have experienced, but it's helpful to add to the conversation so that we can actually get to ultimately hearing from people from the full spectrum. But it becomes a defense mechanism and causes me to hide from those I don't feel safe with. And I put an asterisk around safe, because it comes up in this next bit of slides, which was really where I had come to the all-encompassing understanding, which was when I did the word association for the belly. It was glaring me in the face. It was so obvious. This is my solar plexus, the belly, because that's where we are in our physical body and the chakras. That area is where the belly is. What part of me is this in my body? That would be my solar plexus, right? That was just really glaring, and I learned that from the word associations, all of it. Jumping back, you can see that, and then I put some notes here, and then I have the websites up too. The solar plexus chakra meaning. Your solar plexus chakra is associated with inner confidence, self-esteem, listening to and asserting yourself, and your true needs. All of the themes of the dream, all of those concepts, and this is in several dreams. So this is the first time I had this breakthrough where I got to this understanding that my subconscious is telling me that my solar plexus needs attention, which is amazing. That we're built to do that. When it's out of balance, we leave ourselves more vulnerable to self-harming behaviors, such as self-abandonment and self-compromise. Self-compromise would be like, okay, I'm going to go against my morals so I can fit in, right? That's an balanced solar plexus. And that can lead to those external actions like coping and masking in groups so that you can pass. And then you find yourself, some people like teenagers, doing things that they know are not good for them, certain habits and things that help you spiral because you're trying to identify with others and you're compromising yourself, which again, the true self with a capital S in our esoteric and occult studies is the divine expression of you, which will only make decisions that lead to more life and more happiness and more fulfillment, not things that harm you and lead to your detriment. So again, this isn't that surface level debate of, oh, I enjoy partaking in XYZ, so that means it's good. No, it's like, how does it affect you? If your physical body is deteriorating while you're taking part in action X, then action X, by definition of the esoteric science, is not something that is positive or for you in terms of soul growth. We may struggle with low self-esteem and having a hard time seeing the positive qualities we bring to the world. In this state, it's difficult to feel motivated to reach our full potential. The Manipura chakra governs personal power and identity. Identity, again, all of these themes from the dream, but it's also connected to digestive health and metabolism. Here we get, and I have that part about, in the word associations, we're talked about blockages, and that's like intestinal blockages, anxiety leading to intestinal problems, all of these physical symptoms that come as an aftermath or an outshowing of these internal issues that are actually spiritual issues first, thought issues, mind issues. Here we can see in metabolism as well, people that have suffered from depression, you can see them coping through eating, and then they become overweight, and then they have other intestinal issues or metabolism issues as well. So it's very interesting how this goes on to talk about how we can see the emerging intuitive understanding of the brain-gut connection or mental health and mood connection to our gut health. It's all connected. That's why science and psychology need to partner with spirituality to really get this whole thing moving in the right direction. It's really exciting to see that some people are starting to do that holistic approach. Working to balance the Manipura chakra honors this holistic way of looking at personal health and can even be a way to mitigate the negative effects of digestive system disorders or personality disorders, which we're kind of exploring right now. And this from another website, Body Tomi. The solar plexus chakra talks about, in Hindi mythology, Sanskrit language, the chakra represents a wheel of energy. There are apparently 7 chakras, which are points of energy in the subtle body, the knowledge of which was used for treating the sick and for the medicinal and health-related purposes in ancient times. So again, this is ancient information and practices. The solar plexus chakra, known as the Manipura or the Manipuraka, and is associated with the digestive and metabolic processes of the human body. The symbol of the chakra is a downward pointing triangle enclosed in a circle and bordered by 10 flower petals. Tibetan Buddhism too propagates the concept of these chakras. Solar plexus chakra is said to correspond with feelings of fear, anxiety, introversion, personal power, opinion formation, and spiritual growth. All of these things that went up into the themes of the Saint Dream. So again, this was like my really aha moment that, okay, this is what my subconscious is trying to get me to focus on. So different from my original like surface level dream interpretation without doing the inner work, right? So this is why this is valuable in spending this time to do this work. It's really fascinating. Thus, the solar plexus is a bundle of nerves located in the abdomen area. Along with medical and anatomical importance, there is a lot of mysticism and spirituality associated with this part of the human body. Its vulnerability to physical blows is well known in various martial arts, but its real metaphysical significance runs much deeper than that. And this is where I put that note to self in the last slide where I said, my airport shows that I do have a part of me that is extroverted and is comfortable expressing and connecting, but I don't share it with everyone because I don't feel safe with everyone, right? People that I don't know have burned me, so I hide this and mask, give them a version that they can tolerate, right? And then I save the real me for intimate relationships, people that I really know well. And this point about feeling safe connected to me with this idea of the solar plexus being known in martial arts as like a fatal blow place. And this came up, this is so amazing, in this website that I was looking at here. Let me share that. Body tummy, where he talks about the most common referral to the solar plexus comes in the subject of unarmed physical combat, because a hard blow to this area can completely knock the wind out of any individual, leaving him or her exposed and vulnerable. Remember the word association, underbelly, vulnerability. It's all solar plexus, solar plexus. It can knock the wind out of someone, leaving him exposed to and vulnerable to the next blow. However, it is not just in combat that the solar plexus is important. There was also the association when I was doing the word association with the belly about how it's important but often overlooked. The belly all came to full circle with this. So it's so interesting how that happens. And it happened for Robert A. Johnson as well. It's not just in combat that the solar plexus is important. It's an integral part of the human anatomy, which plays an important role in the overall functioning of the body. Apart from this, it also has spiritual significance as a chakra point known from ancient times. And then this other page where it talks about signs of an imbalanced solar plexus chakra is so interesting. And again, I'll post all of these websites. This is actually where that second definition also came about. Sanskrit and Hindu philosophy, as well as Tibetan understanding of the chakras. That's actually in the beginning of this page, but down here it gives a lot of information that's really helpful. Signs of an imbalanced solar plexus chakra are domineering attitude, aggressiveness, not feeling motivated in life, low self-esteem, difficulty making decisions. Again, I talked about when I was lost in the dream, that dream association was about my inner child feeling uncomfortable making decisions. Going back to childhood, where it's like I didn't have a father guidance, that maternal instinct, where the masculine energy in terms of the left brain being very logical and being very solid in your decision making, feeling confident that you are making the right decision. The feminine might feel a little bit more worry and angst when she doesn't have that healthy masculine energy to make her feel comfortable making decisions. But everyday life and just adulting makes you have to make decisions. So at some point I learned to be decisive and make decisions and all of those things, but there are still ways when I'm out of balance where this comes up again. And those are moments in life that will be triggers for me when I find that I'm having difficulty making decisions, or I might be having digestive issues and things like that. It shows that this is out of balance. And it goes on to say signs of a balanced solar plexus. A person with a balanced solar plexus chakra walks in with a certain humble assuredness in themselves. They are the wise listeners rather than the loud talkers in a crowd. They are in tune with their goals, passions, and personal power. They do not spend time on gossip, putting others down, or questioning their personal actions. And then this is interesting too, because I was like, this kind of was also represented in the belly with the conversation that went on with the people. And in previous dreams where I talk about bullying and gossip and putting people down, all of that is signs and displaying imbalance of the solar plexus. So this is, again, dream people. It wasn't about the post office. It wasn't about UPS. It wasn't about Johnny Depp and Amber Heard. It's about the solar plexus and being out of balance. People with a balanced solar plexus also find greater ease in reversing negative thought patterns because their sense of self is strong. Signs include an empowered attitude, calmness, again, my mechanic, being passionate, having strong self-esteem, sense of self and life purpose, a healthy metabolism, and a healthy appetite. Super cool. So to conclude with our analysis, we had two more dream images to finish up on, and then we get to the final steps of our dream work. And this is, I only have about 3 more slides left. Uniforms. When I thought about where I see these traits in me, you'll notice I shifted the question here to help me in this step. I think of uniforms as the part of me that tries to fit in. This part of me judges and jumps to conclusions. This part of me demands routine and exactness, which is another trait about which you'll find in autism spectrum disorder, is the need for routine and exactness and feeling this loss of control that leads to these autistic meltdowns as well. That feeling of loss of control, or when someone does something that upsets your routine. I noticed that this part of myself is also my own personal negative self-talk, which I'll talk about over here on the right, how that happens. When I feel triggered by judgment, gossip, or bullying, I put on the uniform, or I make others put on the uniform, is how I kind of saw this This is how I mask. I put on the uniform, or I cause others to put on the uniform, like kind of metaphorically. And this is my fight or flight response. And this was where I really took a deeper dive into this and understanding that, in reference to my word associations over here on the right, I'm reading, when I feel personally unoriginal, boring, or a lack of identity, I retreat or withdraw. It's my flight response. It's also a sign of the unbalanced solar plexus. So if I'm in a social situation and I don't match the uniform of the people around me, I don't connect. So I retreat to where I can feel connected again within myself. This is not unhealthy, but in the terms of doing it, and instead of understanding that I am okay as I am, to show up in situations and maybe share a little bit more of myself to help others connect with me in places and spaces where people are willing to do that, then I could help be more positively serving my solar plexus. And then again, when I feel loss of control, when that routine is broken, lack of order, I have that ASD meltdown I was just talking about, in terms of I demand routine or order from others. There was a time when, I was heading to an amusement park and I wanted to stop at this one place to get shoes first, walking shoes, and then I wanted to go there. And the person I was going with was like, oh, let's pull over here and stop and get some ice because I want to get something I spilled off on my car. And they were just so focused on a different path that I completely shattered my feeling of what needed to happen next. I completely had a meltdown. I didn't understand what it was at the time because I didn't know any of this, but I literally didn't want to go to the amusement park anymore. We did that, we pulled over, but I can get so set in a tantrum where I was just like, that break in the routine in my mind was enough to fully deplete my energy. Because of course, and you think about it fully, going out to an amusement park, being around that many people, a lot of that, it takes a lot of energy, but I was really geared up to do it because it was part of I was doing it for my, even my activities that I was doing for Leo season as part of my living monad activities. And so one thing that throws you off track, and you can really just shut down and have this breakdown and understanding why that's happening and how to cope with it better and how to move past those things, and having someone that's supportive and understanding why those breaks in routine can be so detrimental for a person with autism, or a person who just is like, just has this trait in general. It could happen with OCD as well. When you take something out of order that a person has in a certain place, it can really mess with their psyche for different reasons, and helping them by understanding that and understanding that within yourself as well. Self-awareness goes a long way. So anyways, I associated the uniform with a fight response as well, because I will fight by putting someone in the uniform. You have to act this certain way in order to serve my need for control, routine, and balance. And that can be unhealthy as well, a sign of an unbalanced solar plexus. So this is all really good stuff to help me understand the uniform symbol in the dream, which was really crazy. Eyes and ears, lastly. I was just really thinking in a literal place at this point, because I came to connect it with ASD and associating with all this other stuff. So I was like, yeah, in physical life, I really have sensitivity to some light and sounds. I've had recent eye irritations and more frequent headaches, more signs that this needs work and attention, right? I've taken the blessing of the senses for granted. This was relating to the dream and all that too, how when I was no longer could hear, all the things that would happen in life if I didn't have my sight or my hearing, things like that we take for granted. It was really a humbling or an important factor in the dream work when I was doing this interpretation, not taking our senses and our abilities for granted. And if I allow distractions in life, I lose focus on what's important. Again, the stomach, the gut, word analysis or associations, very important, but often overlooked. And I myself was overlooking this part of myself, my solar plexus, and my health, and my life had an impact for that. I noticed here as my two major points in this interpretation was that when I make true connections with others, we both feel seen and heard. In the dream, it started off with this drama of not having this connection, not looking in the eyes and all that stuff, which is very interesting because a common trait of autism is a discomfort and avoidance of eye contact. I don't know if I have that specifically, but I do know that I made an effort to look and make eye contact, because again, you might be part of coping and masking, but I do know that spiritually, the eyes are the window to the soul. So I love to look into a person's eyes. I can also read their energy very well by doing that. So when people avoid eye contact, it is a very interesting dynamic. And there's also other cultures where to have direct eye contact is a sign of disrespect. You know, like I think Asian cultures where it is customary to look down, and understanding even that about people is really important and fascinating when you're interacting with people of different cultures, to understand that you just don't enforce your dynamic of interaction on another person, understand their level of interaction and meet them there in order to really have a true connection where both people feel seen and both sides feel heard. And I summed it up by, when I focus on the spiritual, I feel balanced, healthy, and at one again. And this way of writing at one is all throughout the Alice Bailey books. And I really love it because it's almost like it's a tone, but it's also being at one, where you unify the different parts of yourself and you are rebalanced and whole. The final step of, or the second to last step of the inner work, is to give yourself an overall meaning of the dream. I added this extra part of taking away an occult lesson, an occult takeaway for myself. And then the final step will be the ritual that you do to really cement the dream. So the comment here about the interpretation step of the dream is to ask yourself, what is my unconscious advising me to do? I wrote that the overall meaning of this dream for me was that the healed parts of myself recognize harmful patterns and have sent warning in both my inner world through my dreams and the outer world, waking life. When I neglect my internal, my external suffers. The message has manifested in social and physical outer circumstances. The occult lesson is as within, so without. You might have heard as above, so below, but I put a source here from WordPress. This is the biggest secret of life found inside the tomb. The quote is one of the 7 principles of Hermes Trismegistus, author of Hermetic Corpus. As within, so without, as above, so below. It can be interpreted in multiple ways, yet the most suitable meaning would be, as within, what we think within ourselves, so without, will be expressed or reflected in the world we live. As above, as in heaven. I love how they wrote this, as your own mind, which we're learning from the Bible and Alice Bailey syncretism, is that as heaven is within your own mind, the kingdom of God is within, so below, so on earth, in your body and environment. So really powerful lesson here. And she goes on, she or he in the article goes on to say, if we think good, good will follow. If we think evil, evil will follow. Whatever we think or accept consciously will definitely be the circumstances of our life. While the context more specifically defines the meaning of the phrase, on a general level, it simply expresses the interconnectedness of all things, which again, we're working on through the 7 rays. And I speak on this heavily in Ray 4, which I'm going to post along with this video. So the saying can be more explicitly stated as inside you, so outside you. And to finish, we have the final step of Robert A. Johnson's inner work is the ritual. You take a conscious physical action to honor your dream. I shared that my action, my ritual for this dream was I wore my weird shirt and presented this psychoanalysis on my channel. Normalizing the very normal shades and differences in one another is a very powerful and underestimated first step. There's room for improvement socially in the field of modern psychology as far as understanding and treating adult autism spectrum disorder, especially in women who are known to be routinely misdiagnosed or missed in diagnoses entirely. Also, I finally agreed to watch Lost. All right, this is probably a 2-hour video. I really, really appreciate your time in going through this journey with me. I hope that you are able to look into Robert A. Johnson's process for dream analysis and psychoanalysis and do a psychoanalysis on yourself. It's really powerful, and I hope to continue doing these. And once upon a time down the line, I will find another example of another good one that's helpful, hopefully to you as well, and I will share that when the time comes. So that is it, and that is all. Thank you so much for watching, and have a great day or evening or night wherever you are in the world. Take care.